The Nelson Mandela Foundation today launched the international program of Madiba's anniversary since his passing that will include the guests for the lecture for 2023. The 5th of December this year will mark the 10th anniversary since Nelson Mandela passed away, whilst the 18th of July will mark his 105th birthday. As such, the Nelson Mandela Foundation revealed planned activities for the year to key news editors and journalists. The foundation will dedicate its activities and program work for the year to reminding our nation and the world that South Africa of our dreams is the South Africa of Madiba's vision and values. Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by Gushwell Brooks, who's the head of Mandela Day at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Gushwell, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
Good evening to the viewers. It's always wonderful being with you.
So, head of Mandela Day, does that mean you only work one day a year?
I guess that's the one question everyone has. No, indeed not. It's extremely busy.
Yeah.
We're actually in the middle of a very busy period as we speak, preparing for the launch of Mandela Day. I mean, to your point, Mandela Day is not just on the 18th of July. We don't believe that it should just be one day of people trying to do good, but much rather what we need to see is more sustainable long-term projects being embarked on so we can deal with some of the most pressing issues that we have at the moment.
All right. I mean, 10 years since Madiba passed, I guess there's some significance in the activities for this year as this milestone is reached. Take us through some of the thinking about the programs that lie ahead.
Definitely. I mean, as for Mandela Day, as I mentioned, one of the key things that we hope to achieve this year is to galvanize the global community and deal with two issues that we can see as being two separate issues, being global climate change on the one end and of course being food insecurity on the other end. But what we've discovered is that the two actually intersect, because as you're well aware, if it rains too much, if it rains too little, people aren't able to grow their food. And I think if there's one thing that the 2019 pandemic has, or the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us during 2020 was that food security became the largest risk and threat during that particular period. So the point being that ultimately it is up to us as ordinary citizens then to ensure that we protect our food security, number one, and number two, that we actually take positive climate action. So what we've been embarking on is planting trees as well as capacitating community food gardens. And what we're hoping to see is that on the 18th of July, that becomes a global event, considering that Mandela Day is in fact an internationally recognized day by none other than the United Nations. So we in discussions with numerous cities across the world, all the way from as far east as New Zealand, all the way to the Western Hemisphere. And on the 18th of July, throughout the 24-hour period, what we're hoping to see is that globally people plant trees as far as the sun reaches.
Were these issues that were close to Madiba's heart, climate change, planting trees?
I think ultimately we should see that Madiba's legacy, as we say, you know, for especially this 10th anniversary, is that, you know, the legacy lives on through you. And I think that we also need to understand that Madiba's legacy ultimately needs to evolve with times and with the most pressing needs. Obviously, if we have to go back to 1994 and what the needs were in South Africa at that time, the needs really were for us to galvanize as a nation, for equality to return, you know, for people to be treated as equals when it came to their basic human rights. But I think many years, you know, later, when we look at the year 2023, what we see is deep levels of poverty and inequality. And ultimately, we need to start dealing with those particular issues, whether it be through our dialogue work, which is, you know, massively expensive. Sumaya Hendricks, the head of our dialogue and advocacy unit, for example, looked back at some of the great work that we've done with early childhood development centers throughout South Africa and how we've done advocacy in that particular space. We've looked at leadership and development, remembering the legacy of Nelson Mandela, but more importantly, also looking forward, especially for the youth, to say, but hang on, what is it that we are actually going to do moving forward? And obviously we have our archives team that looks after the legacy of Nelson Mandela, looks after what he has left us, the letters, his office, the memory aspect, the research into Madiba's life. So he has an extremely expensive legacy, and it's a legacy that also adapts with time as we move forward.
I just wonder, as time passes, is it becoming harder and harder to keep people working as hard as they did on the work of Mandela Day and the legacy that you're busy trying to uphold, particularly the international community?
Indeed, and I think that we also have to be honest about the fact that priorities do change. I think the global, COVID-19 pandemic is but one example, is a good reason for why we saw a slowdown around Mandela Day. I mean, we were all, as we recall the dark days of lockdown. There was lockdowns globally. Apart from that, I think it also changed the priorities of communities because people were cash strapped. I mean, people lost jobs, people lost businesses, and we're still seeing the knock-on and hangover effects from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this year being the 10th anniversary since Madiba's passing gives us a unique opportunity to reflect back on that. And I think, especially if we look at what that strap line that you mentioned, that the South Africa of Madiba's dreams is ultimately what we envision today. I think that's something that's key for me, and we need to really reinvigorate that global message around that, and that global excitement around the legacy of Nelson Mandela. So definitely 2023 is the year to remind the world of that. And I think we also have an opportunity now to be a little less selfish, for lack of a better term, where we can look at the broader, beyond the self, and ensure that we're actually giving back to society ultimately. So we're hoping to see that fundamental and significant change.
What's on the cards for the 5th of December this year?
Well, the 5th of December is, of course, the day on which Madiba passed away 10 years ago, or it would be the 10th, the day marking the 10th year since his passing. And there's going to be a lot of ceremonial and remembrance moments throughout that particular period, just to remind us of the solemn, of the solemn occasion that it ultimately is. But I think also I don't want to give away too much, because I think there are massive plans in the works to mark a decade since Madiba's passing. But I think also what we need to keep in mind is actually the work that leads up throughout the course of the year up until that particular point, whereby we're not just mourning and grieving the passing of Madiba, but we're asking ourselves a key question, I think all of us globally as well as in this country, and particularly in this country, is have we lived up to that legacy? If Nelson Mandela had to be here today, would this be the country of his visions? Would this be the country that he's actually proud of? And I think that for me would be the key focus, as opposed to just the 5th of December itself.
Gushwell, I'm sure that we'll have a number of conversations, as we lead up to 18 July, but also beyond as we go towards December. So thanks so much indeed for this start of those conversations tonight.
Most definitely, indeed. I'm sending you your personal invitation for the launch of Mandela Day. So I
fantastic.
Hope that you will be there.
No, definitely. And you've got a great voice. Have you ever thought about doing radio? Cheers, Gushwell.